The frozen challenge. The North Sea crashes against jagged cliffs. Ice clings to your beard. The wind cuts through wool like a blade through water. You're standing on the edge of the world, where winter lasts 8 months and darkness swallows the day. The ground is frozen solid. Your longhouse is packed with warriors, families, and livestock, all sharing one roof. And suddenly, nature demands attention. There's no modern plumbing, no indoor toilet, and definitely no luxury of privacy. For most people today, this would be a nightmare. But for the Vikings who conquered these frozen lands for centuries, this was just another Tuesday. Another problem to solve, with brutal efficiency and surprising sophistication. Imagine living in a world where minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit is normal, where your bathroom might be shared with 30 other people, where one mistake in waste management could sicken your entire settlement or attract wolves to your door. How did they do it? How did the Norse people, famous for their raids and exploration, manage something as basic yet critical as going to the bathroom in the harshest conditions on Earth? The answer isn't what you'd expect. They didn't just dig holes and hope for the best. They engineered systems. They studied wind patterns, drainage, and even the behavior of frozen waste. They turned something disgusting into something manageable, even hygienic by medieval standards. Advanced systems, not primitive solutions. Here's what most history books won't tell you. Viking sanitation wasn't primitive. It was advanced for its time. Archaeological evidence from settlements across Scandinavia reveals wooden toilet seats, sophisticated drainage systems, and communal latrines that would make Roman engineers nod in respect. They built privies that lasted generations. They separated human waste from animal waste. They even had cultural codes that governed where, when, and how you handled nature's call. Because in the Viking world, survival wasn't about being the strongest. It was about being the smartest as we journey into the frozen heart of Norse settlements. You'll discover how longhouses were designed with sanitation in mind, how wooden privies became architectural marvels, how ash, seaweed, and even moss played starring roles in Viking hygiene. You'll see how a people without modern technology created bathroom solutions that some rural communities still use variations of today. The harsh reality of Norse winters, the Norwegian coast in January, is a realm of ice and stone. Temperatures plunge well below freezing. Daylight becomes a memory, replaced by 18 hours of darkness that presses down like a physical weight. Snow doesn't fall gently, here it drives horizontally, turning the air into a wall of white knives. For the Vikings who called these lands home, winter wasn't a season, it was a siege, and every aspect of life, including the most basic human needs, had to be reimagined to survive it. Picture a typical Viking settlement. Longhouses stretched like ships turned upside down, their wooden frames groaning under snow loads. Inside, smoke from the central hearth curled toward roof vents, carrying the smells of cooking meat, damp wool, and too many bodies pressed together for warmth. Families slept on raised platforms along the walls. Livestock, sheep, goats, sometimes even cattle occupied the lower ends, their body heat adding to the communal warmth. Privacy was a luxury no one could afford, but warmth came with a price. In these cramped quarters, with dozens of people and animals sharing space, sanitation became critical. One outbreak of disease could decimate a settlement. One careless act could contaminate the water supply. The Vikings understood this instinctively. They had to. Their ancestors had learned these lessons through generations of trial and error, through winters that killed the unprepared and rewarded the wise. When nature called in the middle of a blizzard, venturing outside wasn't just uncomfortably, visibility dropped to zero. The wind could knock a grown man off his feet. Frostbite could claim fingers and toes in minutes. Yet the alternative, fouling the living space, was unthinkable. The longhouse was sacred in its own way. Not spiritually sacred like a temple, but practically sacred. It was the difference between life and death. Engineering the longhouse for sanitation, step inside a Viking longhouse and you're entering a world of careful planning. The building itself is a marvel of medieval engineering, sometimes stretching over 30 meters long and 6 meters wide. Walls made from vertical wooden planks, roofs thatched with turf or reeds, floors of packed earth covered with rushes or straw. But look closer and you'll see that every element serves multiple purposes, including the management of human waste. The layout was never random. The central hearth dominated the main hall, its fire burning day and night. Smoke rose through a hole in the roof, but not directly. The Vikings understood airflow. They positioned the smoke hole to create natural ventilation, drawing fresh air in through carefully placed gaps and pushing stale air out. This same principle of air management extended to their sanitation systems. Smells, like smoke, followed predictable patterns. Control the airflow, and you control the odor. Living quarters occupied the sides of the longhouse raised platforms where families slept on benches covered with furs and blankets. At one end, usually the southern end to catch maximum sunlight, the family lived and worked. At the opposite end, animals were kept during winter, separated by a low partition but sharing the same roof. This arrangement wasn't just about warmth, it was strategic. Animal waste was collected and managed differently than human waste. The Vikings knew that mixing the two created worse problems than keeping them separate. But here's where it gets interesting. In many longhouses, particularly larger ones occupied by wealthy families or jarls, there's evidence of indoor toilet arrangements. Not toilets as we know them, but sophisticated solutions for nighttime or emergency use. Wooden buckets with seats, positioned in alcoves near the sleeping areas but separated by curtains or wooden screens. These weren't dump hand-forget containers. They were emptied daily, their contents carried to designated areas outside the settlement. Some longhouses even had small, attached structures lent to additions that served as covered privies. Archaeological evidence from sites in Iceland and Greenland shows these additions clearly. Small wooden rooms, barely large enough to stand in, built onto the side of the main structure. They had wooden seats with holes, positioned over pits that were dug as deep as the frozen ground allowed. In winter, these pits didn't smell. The cold saw to that. But in summer, they required careful management, regular emptying and refilling with fresh earth or ash. To control odor and flies, the entrance to these privies was always positioned to face away from the prevailing winds. The Vikings were obsessed with wind direction. They had to be. In a world without walls thick enough to block smells, controlling airflow was everything. Site the privy wrong, and every breeze would carry its contents straight into your living space. Site it correctly, and even the strongest winds would carry smells away into the wilderness. The communal privy public health innovation. In larger Viking settlements, particularly trading centers like Hedeby and Jorvik, individual household privies weren't enough. Population density demanded larger solutions. Enter the communal privy structure that served multiple families and revealed just how seriously the Vikings took public sanitation. These weren't simple outhouses. They were substantial wooden buildings, sometimes as large as small longhouses, positioned at the edges of settlements. Archaeological evidence shows they were built over pits that could be 3 meters deep or more, lined with wood or stone to prevent collapse and contamination of surrounding soil. Multiple wooden seats were ranged along one or both walls, allowing several people to use the facility simultaneously. Privacy, minimal. But in Viking culture, this wasn't the source of shame it might be today. Practicality trumped modesty. The communal privy served multiple purposes beyond the obvious. It was a gathering place, somewhere people exchanged news and gossip while attending to bodily needs. It was also a statement of civic organization. A well-maintained communal privy signaled a settlement that had its act together, that understood public health, and that could coordinate community efforts for the common good. The management of these facilities was sophisticated. Evidence from Jorvik shows that the pits were regularly emptied, their contents removed, and used as fertilizer for fields outside the settlement. The Vikings had discovered what modern agriculture rediscovered centuries later: human waste, properly composted, makes excellent fertilizer. Nothing was wasted in Viking society. Everything had value, even shit. Literally, tools and materials. The art of Viking hygiene. The Vikings didn't have toilet paper. They didn't have running water. They didn't have soap as we know it. Yet archaeological evidence and historical records suggest they maintained standards of personal hygiene that would shock most people who picture them as dirty barbarians. The tools and materials they used for bathroom hygiene reveal a culture far more sophisticated than popular myths suggest. Let's start with the basics. Cleaning after using the toilet. What did Vikings use? The answer varies by region and season, but several materials appear consistently across archaeological sites. Moss was the gold standard: soft, absorbent, and naturally antimicrobial. Certain types of moss, like sphagnum, made excellent toilet paper substitutes. Vikings gathered it in summer, dried it, and stored it for year-round use. Bundles of dried moss were kept near privies, ready for use. In coastal areas, seaweed served the same purpose. Certain types, when dried, became soft and papery. Others remained slightly slippery, which actually made them more effective for cleaning. Wool scraps were another option. Old, worn clothing was never thrown away. It was repurposed, and one of those purposes was personal hygiene. Wool scraps could be washed and reused multiple times before finally being burned. The Vikings were practical people. Nothing was wasted. Ash played a starring role in Viking hygiene. The central hearth produced ash constantly, and this ash was far too valuable to waste. Mixed with water, it created a mildly alkaline solution that cut through grease and killed bacteria. Vikings used ash water for washing hands, cleaning wooden toilet seats, and even as a rudimentary form of soap. Sprinkled dry, ash-controlled odors in privies and absorbed moisture. Lessons for today. What can modern people learn from Viking sanitation practices? More than you might think. In an age of climate change and growing interest in sustainable living, the Viking approach offers valuable lessons. They wasted nothing. They worked with nature rather than against it. They understood that proper sanitation isn't a luxury, it's a foundation of civilization. Their methods are still relevant today. Off-grid communities and sustainable living advocates are rediscovering Viking techniques. Composting toilets work on the same principles as Viking privies. Understanding wind patterns and drainage remains crucial for any outdoor sanitation system. But perhaps the most important lesson is simpler. Take care of the basics, and everything else becomes possible. The Vikings conquered the North Atlantic, explored North America, and built a trading network that stretched from Baghdad to Newfoundland. They created art, poetry, and technologies that influenced European civilization for centuries. And they did all of this while maintaining sanitation systems that kept their communities healthy enough to achieve these feats. True strength isn't about conquering everything in your path. It's about living in balance with the world around you, even when that world is frozen, harsh, and unforgiving. Welcome to the wisdom of the North. Welcome to the real Viking legacy.